Welcome to the WFM Media and Window and Facade magazine. As you all know, architect Kiran Kapadia is the founder and director of Kapadia Associates Private Limited. Sir, could you please tell us about your company and how did you enter the field?
Sure. So, I'm basically, I'm an architect, and I studied my bachelor's program at the School of Architecture in Ahmedabad, had the opportunity to study under, masters like Anant Raje and V.V. Doshi. This was in the late 70s and the early 80s. And I finished my architectural program from Ahmedabad in 1984. And then, worked in Mumbai for a couple of years with a firm called Architects Combined, which was a very prominent firm at that time under Mr. Iyer, who is no more, K.R. Iyer. And then in '86, I decided to, go abroad to the US to pursue my Masters of Architecture program. I went to Harvard University at the Graduate School of Design at Harvard. Which is a 2-year master's program in urban design, which I did. That was from 1986 to 88, and then decided to get some work experience there for a few years, and then finally all said and done. At 1991, I actually came back to Mumbai and started my own practice, which is Kapadia Associates. So the firm started in '91, so now we're about a little over 30 years old. Started off obviously, as a very, very small one-man practice, 2-man practice kind of a thing. And then, over the years, we've kind of gradually developed into a full-fledged architectural firm, doing a wide kind of range of projects. So that's broadly the background. So, today we've obviously, we are, one of the, I would say, medium to medium large size firms in the city, and things like that. So we're about 130 people currently. That's where we are, with offices in Mumbai and in Pune. So that's really the background of Kapadia Associates actually.
So right. Your base for your architecture was so thorough that you've been going through 30 years of transition in India from 1991 to till now. So you would have seen the transition over the period, over 30 years. Could you please tell me what inspired you to become an architect?
So, honestly speaking, back in those days, honestly, there wasn't, you basically, unlike the youngsters of today, where you have a lot of choice as far as the professions are concerned, you can do anything and everything. That time they were kind of limited. If you were interested in business, you did a kind of a commerce degree, or if you were interested in science, you either went into engineering or you went into medicine and things like that. I obviously was more kind of interested in the more the engineering side, but I also had a kind of a creative bent. And at that point of time, if you had a bit of a creative bent where you wanted to mix the arts and the sciences, one of the few professions that you considered was architecture. So that's how this thing, and there wasn't too much kind of this thing. I thought that it might be, I knew what architects do, and was interested in in combining the artistic side with the engineering side, and therefore I decided to go in for architecture. And as luck would have it, without giving too much, I'd applied for School of Architecture Ahmedabad at the entrance exam, and I got in. So then, honestly speaking, from there, it became a very different story, because I think what really, influenced me was, going to CEPT Ahmedabad, because it's a small school, a very, very leading school also at that point of time, with, Ahmedabad also had a kind of a very strong pedigree of Louis Kahn and Le Corbusier projects, but also people like Doshi, who was responsible for setting up the school. He was teaching very actively, and a lot of the younger faculty members who had worked with Doshi were also the faculty members. So it was all in all a very, very kind of inspirational environment. So once we went to Ahmedabad, you really got immersed into, you ate, drank, slept architecture, literally. And I think those were the more formative years. I think that's where you kind of really, learned the kind of, the nuts and bolts of architecture, both design, technical, etc., etc. So I think I really owe a lot to SEPT Ahmedabad actually to where I am today in terms of the background.
So I think in late 80s, there were not many choices for architects. If you are passionate about the subject, and CPT, SEPT is one of the dream college.
Absolutely, yeah. So that time they were very, unlike today, there were not too many colleges. There was JJ and Academy of Architecture in Mumbai, and there was SPA in Delhi and SEPT Ahmedabad and things like that. So those were the choices. And being from Bombay, I applied to Ahmedabad as a first choice and luckily got in. So then there was no kind of, I didn't even apply to any of the Mumbai colleges or anything of that sort. So and then, of course, Ahmedabad being Ahmedabad, there were lots of people at that point of time, from all over the country actually, studying at Ahmedabad. Because at that point of time, there were no kind of reservations or anything. It was a very small school. The intake was also very small. They only took in 30 students a year actually in the architecture program. So the total strength of the school was only 155 years. 30 per year. So everybody knew each other kind of stuff. And, you learned a lot from seniors. You attended reviews of the seniors, Doshi, and they would come and talk, spend time at the campus. All of those kinds of things were really kind of, made you as an architect, honestly speaking.
And I still see an influence of Doshi and Louis Kahn in your project.
Yes. So Doshi, of course, the campus itself is quite inspirational. The SEPT campus is very inspirational, being designed by Doshi, and then in the neighborhood, are other buildings designed by Doshi. Also, the Louis Kahn campus, the IIM Ahmedabad campus is not very far away. So, obviously you are surrounded by, the masters kind of a thing. So you could kind of literally, they're not just in books. You could actually, go and visit and actually see it right there. So, so I think Ahmedabad was truly, to me, a very kind of distinctly kind of formative kind of experience for me as an architect.
So you said from 91 onwards, could you please tell us about some of the turning points in your life?
Okay, so I came back in 91 and started the practice, and as like any other practice that one starts, you don't have too many projects. You start with small projects. Started with a house here and a house there, mainly for friends or family friends and things like that. And then also at that point of time did a few competitions and things like that. I also initial years, because one had more time available. I taught at some schools of architecture here, like Kamla Raheja, School of, KRBI. I taught at Academy for a couple of years. This was as a kind of visiting faculty. So I think, and gradually, as, projects got, built, people got to know you, projects were published in different magazines. Generally speaking, people got to kind of, hear of you, and then you got more projects. So I think that's what kind of, built up the practice gradually. We kind of increased in size and things like that. The projects also, you must remember that the early 90s was also the time of the economic boom. Manmohan Singh had come in. I think the whole, economy, the Indian economy opened up. I think projects became bigger. Projects became more complex. Foreign direct investment was allowed. So a lot of kind of foreign investment came in. Foreign companies came in. So all in all, the economically the country was booming, because of Manmohan Singh's policy. So as a result of that, obviously all professions had to kind of gear up for that. So I think it's you call it being lucky and being at the right time at the right place kind of a thing. So that's what really kind of happened. And professionally, I would say gradually built up. But I think one of the first kind of I would say the big break that we got in a public project, because earlier we were doing small projects, an office building here, a house here, house there, some interiors, etc. But I think the first break that we got was we were working on India's first mall, actually, which is Crossroads at Tardev. I don't know whether you remember that. But that the client had actually, it was quite interesting. The client had appointed, it was in Tardev. It was a retrofitting of an old factory, which was the Roche factory. It was a pharmaceutical factory, and for certain reasons of local regulations, they couldn't tear it down. and they wanted to convert that into a mall. They had appointed an architect from Singapore, a very, very well-known firm called DP Architects. And they wanted, this was done by the Piramals at that point of time, the Piramal Pharmaceuticals, they owned Roche. And they wanted a local architect to help the Singapore architect. And we were a young firm, and they didn't want to go in for a very, very well-known established firm. So they wanted to go in for a young firm who could work with so there would be no egos in place, between an established firm. They wanted kind of fresh this thing. And since, I had studied abroad and, worked abroad, they felt that, a young practitioner who had studied abroad would be the right kind of a flavor to work with an established Singapore firm. And that's how it started. So we worked together with the Singapore firm quite closely. They were also extremely open, and it was a big learning experience. And and then what obviously happened is, as a project, we were, and also it was not just that they did the design and handed it over to us. We were involved with the entire design process, which means workshops in Bombay, workshops in Singapore, and things like that. They had also not done too much work in India before. They'd done work in Singapore, so we went and saw a lot of their projects there. They tried to understand how the industry here works, the construction industry. And we worked in a very, very close collaborative kind of a spirit, actually, which was very nice, I think. And the firm then had to expand because the arrangement was that, at a certain stage, Singapore firm would kind of exit the project, and we would have to do all the heavy lifting, as they say. So that's what. So I think that project was a bit of a fast track project. We started working on that project in '96.
Wow.
And 1996, so 5 years after I started my practice, and the project got commissioned in '99. So 3 years it was start to finish. '99 September is when it opened, actually, because I clearly remember that our son was born in the same month, actually. So I remember that quite clearly. So September '99 is when this opened, and I think they exited the project a couple of years before that, so we had to do a fair amount of work on that, and the office suddenly had to expand from about 8-10 people to about straight away to about 25-30 people.
Right. I remember in '98, '99, people flocking into the mall.
Yes, exactly. It was quite controversial. Traffic jams. Traffic jams. They didn't know how to control traffic. People were That's exactly '99. That was exactly true. And
the CR2 mall, right?
CR2 mall. And that was the first one, was Crossroads 1, Tardeo. And then we also did the CR2 at Nariman Point, which is the, retail down below and parking up above and things like that. So both those were same clients. Both those were big projects for us. And then, we kind of got to be known as so-called, malls were new, malls were coming into the country for the first time. So these were our first experience with large public projects. And we had to then grow the office because these projects came about, and not too many people had experience in these kinds of projects. So this is called the first mover advantage, and that's how it kind of gradually kind of starts. So that was one big kind of jump for us, that we kind of did. The second, big jump, of course, was that residential sector was opening up with taller towers. So we kind of got into the residential sector quite a bit again, and things like that. A lot of kind of large-scale residential projects came up and things like that. And we all, we used to do office buildings here and there, and then we got our next big break happened, in somewhere in the early 2000s. Is we were asked to design a campus for Unilever, actually Hindustan Unilever in Andheri. So this was a large campus where we first did the master plan. It was on about 16 acres of land in Andheri. And their goal, Hindustan Lever's goal, was that they had, multiple offices located all around the city and around the country, small offices, and they had outgrown their main head office, which was in Churchgate. And they wanted to move to one consolidated campus where everybody would come together, including, some of their outstation offices like Bangalore. They wanted to consolidate into one location because they found that to be far more effective from a managerial perspective and things like that. They wanted to have a hub. So they again approached us where they asked us to do a master plan for their campus, and they obviously liked that. And then it turned into an actual project, which again we kind of saw it through. So it's a large campus that exists today in Andheri. It's got offices. It's got a training center with a small kind of a hotel of about 90 rooms. It's got a recreational facility for the employees. So it's all captive. It's for their own use. That was a large campus that we did. So that was again, quite a prominent, Hindustan Lever being a problem. So that was another kind of big break that we got. That was I would call it a kind of a, second, I would call it another big project that got us into a little bit of the public eye.
Was it in early 2000s?
Yes, that was in about 2004, 2005 is when that campus came up. So then of course by that time the office was established because we had a good roster of clients, and that one thing led to another. We did work. So then the office truly became diverse. We were doing malls and retail environments at one end. We were doing office buildings, which were like Unilever campus. We did a campus for Thermax in Pune, etc., etc. So we did some work in Bangalore. So that kind of thing. And then of course the third component of our projects was residential developments. Like Ashok Towers was done by us. A few other projects were done by us. So that was the kind of growth of the office, honestly speaking.
So my next question was on the same subject, like what are KAPL specializes in, what kind of projects? That you have already answered. You are doing.
Yeah, so I think we don't have a specialty in terms of, but I think we like, honestly, and even today, even after 30 years, we like to do a diverse range of projects. And today also one of the things about the practice is that we even today, if you go to see our website and you see the divisions of our website, so we do, of course, now we've grown, and a few years ago we got a chance with Lodas to do Pallava, which is a city actually.
It's a huge
so the whole city, so whole of Pallava was done by us from the master planning. Of course, a team of people worked on it. We were one of the key people working on it, where we did develop the master plan. And then went on to do a lot of the housing and things like that, and continue even today after so many years. We continue to be involved with Pallava even today, because it's it's close to about it's going to be totally about a few thousand acres, and only about 600-700 has been built. So only about 20 or 30% has been built so far. So we continue to be involved in Pallava even today. So so now at one end, you're looking at large kind of cities and urban design kind of things at one end, and then we do small office buildings and small residential buildings also at the other end, and everything in between. So I think now the practice really, we like the change of scale. We don't want to be doing the same thing and things like that. So obviously the practice has evolved over a period of time, which is nice, I think, as to. In kind of retrospect, look at how the practice has evolved over 30 years. Also the profession has evolved over 30 years also quite a bit, because at one point of time, if you had 25 or 30 people, you were looked at as a large office. Yes. Today 25 or 30 would not be a large office, not for any other reason, but projects have become much bigger. Projects have become much more complex. Developers were earlier kind of very small mom and pop shops. Today, developers have become very, very large developers. Some of them are publicly listed. Lodha, one of our main clients, is a publicly listed company. Godrej Properties, publicly listed company. So they have their due diligences. They have large teams internally working with architects and things like that. Obviously, we've also had to grow in that sense. Because now today, a 100-man office is not uncommon. In the 90s, when I started, a 100-man office was, people said, oh, 100-man office. Today, there are lots of 100-man offices, kind of a thing.
Pallava is a huge development.
It's huge. It's huge, and it continues to be.
Sea Link going to be the major development in Bombay, connecting the South Mumbai to that part of the city. I think the travel will take less time, and people are all moving to that part of Mumbai. I feel that another.
I think city is growing. So city is growing, and these large integrated developments are few and far between. So I think these large integrated developments, and if ever people go to Pallava, it's while connectivity today is a bit of a concern, but it will only develop with the railway line, public connectivity. I mean, not road, but public. I think that will only improve over a period of time as more infrastructure comes in. But if you look at the quality of life that people get there from the point of view of, and I'm really talking about this is middle income, lower middle income kind of stuff when it started. Now, of course, it's got a whole range of people, but now it's got everything from hospitals to schools of different kinds, right from like an IB school at one end to an ICSE school to an SSC school to a CBSE school. So you have choices of schools, playgrounds, facilities of sports, etc., which anybody can take care of and stuff like that. We take advantage of. So I think this gardens for older people. So some people are retiring there. Some people, young people who have have kids only recently, they are moving in there because they want a better quality of life because schools are close by and stuff like that. So I think. So it's been an interesting experience just kind of, working on some of these larger scale projects. So we today continue to work on large scale projects, continue to work on small scale projects. So I think that's the diversity is what is nice, what keeps one going kind of thing.
Right. So you studied in prestigious institutions who always focused on sustainable developments and sustainable practices. What is your take on sustainable architecture?
So I think So I think that's an interesting question, and I think honestly speaking, sustainability relatively is a new buzzword in India. But I think if you look at our traditional architecture, a lot of it was completely sustainable. I think what is happening today is that now, of course, it's become a kind of a global topic of discussion. Everybody, as we do taller buildings, as we build more, etc., carbon footprint, all of those things are becoming critical. And I think you have no choice but to become sustainable. And lot of developers and other clients have taken calls to say that they will become carbon neutral by a certain date. The Indian government is pushing it a lot. So at one end, all architects will need to practice sustainable design, not necessarily only in terms of rating systems and things like that, but in a much deeper sense through passive methods, cross ventilation. Luckily, unlike the West, we don't have to deal with the cold. So all our buildings are naturally ventilated. All our buildings, but looking at cross ventilation. Our problem is the other way around. We have to, honestly speaking, they want to keep the cold out. We have to keep the heat out, actually. So I think insulation, new materials, technology, low carbon concrete, because like a lot of in Europe today, what is happening is that people are building very sustainable buildings with no carbon input, like doing work, even that skyscrapers coming up in timber, for example.
Yeah.
But in India, obviously, timber is not a material of choice because unlike in Canada, there's ample timber. In fact, they have excess timber. In the US, where a lot of the construction is still in wood. But in India, of course, wood is not an option because it is a highly sustainable, but we don't have an option of wood. I think even where we primarily build in concrete, and to some extent in steel, and companies are looking at low carbon steel, low carbon concrete, lot of experimentation, and it's an effort which is not only the architects which have to live by design, but even technology, new materials coming in. A lot of cement companies are looking at it. Again, it's all to do with the push worldwide where we have to become. So I think sustainable architecture is not a as I say, it's not a luxury anymore. People earlier used to think that sustainability is a nice to have. It's no longer a nice to have. It's a must have. It becomes basic and stuff like that. And and I think what I'm going to be seeing, what I'm foreseeing over the years is that at the moment, and I think movements have started happening. In bulk of our residential projects, what happens today is that a developer does a project, he hands it over to the owner or somebody who buys the flat, and then it's kind of, goodbye. Their association with the project ends. I think that is going to change. I think end users are going to become more like in office buildings. It's already happened, where office buildings, tenants who are coming in are actually asking developers, asking the people who build the project as to what are their sustainability goals, how do they measure performance indexes, so you have different kinds of, high performance glass coming through. It's all happening in the commercial sector, that is the office building sector, because a lot of multinationals are coming in and they want to follow international standards across, whether their office is in Europe or America or India. They want to follow the same kind of standards right through. In residential, there is a movement like in Pallava, there's a lot of effort that is going on in terms of not looking at a building level, but looking at a district level. So, for example, solar, not at top of the roof, but solar at a city level kind of thing. Can we use green power? How do you conserve water and, measuring water conservation? How do you, going back and, how do you really get, cross ventilation and better quality windows and stuff like that, where your energy, this thing is lower. They're even suggesting to giving a rebate, for example, to end users, to say that if you, use high quality equipment like air conditioning, which is low, or no, you have the certification, 5-star, 4-star, 3-star, that BEE, Bureau of, Energy Efficiency, B. So I think a lot of these things are coming in, a lot of innovative things are coming in, and you'll see a lot more innovation coming in the sustainability sector, not only in terms of architecture, but even in terms of financing and stuff like that. So, for example, there's a movement going on today, like say, for example, that if you are a green certified residential building and you want to buy a flat there, banks like HDA, whichever banks will actually give a green loan kind of thing, a loan cheaper. So a lot of movement going on in terms of encouraging sustainable architecture in a very, very deep-rooted sense, which is coming in, and we are I think we are at the tip of the iceberg, and unless firms and not only architect firms but across the board, it's a team effort. Everybody starts gearing up for that. There you'll be left behind, kind of.
So that is a great thing to hear from you, that you have seen the development over so many years, that where India stands compared to the global organizations or developers or offices. I think it is still being practiced in office level or big corporate level, but in the local offices or a small scale builder, Lodha, Hiranandani, all are very specific about certain things which they need. But what about the small builders? Like if they are not going for high-rise projects, or if it's in a tier 2 cities.
Sure. So I think that at the moment, I think it's to do with, honestly, it's to do with awareness, honestly speaking. Right. So it's not very difficult to do, even in tier 2 cities. It's just, so once, I think once it's always like this, once the big developers start doing it, the message starts spreading, and even then it will follow in smaller cities and stuff like that. It might take some time to percolate, but I think that the demand is going to come from the end users, honestly speaking. Developers, developers are doing it today. Why do you think the big developers are doing it? The big developers are doing it because what is happening is that they are going, a lot of these big developers are getting investments from foreigners, foreign direct investment. So these guys are asking the developers that what is your sustainability index? What is your sustainability goal? How are you addressing it? You want money from us, but we want to understand all of that stuff. So now what is happening is that more and more people, as awareness increases, I think, as I said, to the tip of the iceberg. So I think it's going to percolate to the smaller cities also. Also, the other thing you must remember is that the government of India, the current government is pushing sustainability and performances, not only as far as buildings are concerned, but even as far as equipments are concerned and stuff like that, ECBC and stuff like that, in a very, very big way. I think, I was at a seminar yesterday, an international seminar yesterday, where they talked about sustainable goals. And one of the things that came about from various experts and things like that, saying that, I think the regulations need to be simplified a lot more, so that it kind of, at the moment, it's still, a lot of it is technical and, mumbo jumbo. And I think if it's, and I think as it gets simplified and more people will follow it, I think it is bound to happen, because the government is doing a big push, because the government is also is a signatory that India is going to be carbon neutral or this thing by a certain date. So they are pushing for clean energy, etc. Clean energy means what? Solar and, wind and stuff like that, that kind of thing. So I think a lot of stuff is happening. No, innovative stuff, I see it happening in the profession.
So our magazine is focused more on facade and fenestration part. It's niche subject, still developing, I think. So what is your take on sustainable facade? We see a lot of glass in places like Gurgaon, Bombay too, in certain what's your take on this sustainable facades, and are we going the right way?
So I would say that, we are not going the right way everywhere. I think as far as office buildings are concerned, I think, as we correctly say, office buildings are concerned, you need glass glazing mainly to get light into the office interiors. And today, glass technology in India has developed quite significantly. You don't even need to import a lot of the glass. Most of the glasses, big companies are already here. They are manufacturing plants here, and they're making a lot of, kind of, as I would call it, high performance glass here, which are performance glasses actually, and things like that, and things like that. So I think, I think that, and I think people are also looking at, things like shading devices and stuff like that coming in. So I think, I think the analysis at the moment in terms of, how your facade is really going to behave with the sun and the rain and things like that is, so one is designing the facade. Then the question is also monitoring the use. So I think there are two things. One is, how much natural light. So in India, the problem is twofold. One is, we have ample natural light available through the day. Which you will cut down the use of kind of, electricity in terms of lighting and stuff like that. In fact, our problem is the other way around, that we want too much natural light. We don't have too many dark days. We have long days, generally speaking. Unlike the West, where they are shortened days, in the winter especially. We don't have a very pronounced winter in that sense, where the days get really shortened. So our daylight is long. And to harness the daylight in terms of, natural light coming in. So I think a lot of innovative use is coming in, and people will need to do more and more of that, of light shelves and stuff like that, and things like that. So the opportunities are significant. And I think how architects, facade engineers work with those opportunities, I think is important. Coming to residential buildings, honestly speaking, that's where I get a little bit of perturbed when you have these kind of glass facades and stuff like that without any shading devices. And also, in India, we're generally used to having, openable windows, or windows that allow the air to come in. And now you have these fixed windows. Also, the problem being that, there are very, very tall buildings coming in. So, with these much taller buildings, having openable windows on the 40th floor is not the most practical thing to do either, and stuff like that. So there are some innovative things that people do. Like, for example, we've done a building at we were at Park in Mumbai, which is a tall building. We actually have, within the window mullions, we've got what is called, vents actually. So, you just open the vent of a window mullion actually. So you don't even have to open the window to allow kind of breeze to come in and natural ventilation to come in and stuff like that. So I think, I think the industry, like the facade industry, the aluminium industry, etc., also needs to kind of parallelly develop and things like that. Which I think, as the volumes increase, I think more and more of that is happening, honestly speaking.
There is more of innovation required in this field when you consider the kind of climate and weather.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Local. So at the moment, we're just kind of importing and using whatever is abroad. But I think locally what the needs are, I think that is something that the industry needs to develop that. And I think it's happening slowly, but it's happening.
Mm-hmm. So I have seen some of your residential projects for Lodha, and I think there are some in Thane too, right? Which you
fair amount. We've done a lot. Residential is our kind of, as I would call it, our kind of main. We do a lot of it because that's what the most developers do. Residential is a lot more than commercial or retail.
If you could split your projects into percentages, what is the kind of residential project percentage and the other?
Yeah, so I would say, so so I think we've done this analysis in the office. So it would still be that we would have about at least 60 to 65% of our projects would be residential.
Right.
And residential also we break it up into two parts. One is I would call kind of group housing, which is large complexes which have multiple buildings and stuff like that. And then there are of course these kinds of individual kind of boutique buildings which are like one-off, which are the South Bombay kind of types, which is luxury, as I would call it, luxury housing and stuff like that, which are small boutique projects. So I would say two types of residential. One is group housing, as I would call it, and the second would be luxury residential, which is boutique residential. And the balance kind of 35% is divided between commercial projects, institutional projects, etc. So we do some schools and campuses and stuff like that, and then we do a fair amount of commercial work as in office buildings, high quality, top grade 1 office buildings and things like that. I think that's something that we do.
In the recent past, could you please tell us about some of your most challenging project as well as some of your most favorite projects which you loved working on? Or
so I think quite a few projects, and I'll give you kind of 4 or 5 different examples of different kinds of projects that we loved working on. And it's just because these projects were challenging. The challenge could be because of clients being more demanding, or the site being specifically kind of challenging in terms of its site conditions. So one, of course, is a very small residential project that we've done in Mumbai, in South Mumbai actually, called Vasant Villas, which is on Babulnath Road. It's a nice small 40,000 square feet single apartment building, and it's very differently done. We've used a lot of local stone and things like that on the facade, and we've kind of worked with that. So Vasant Villas was an interesting project that we did, which is a small luxury residential building. The other end of the spectrum, of course, was the Unilever campus, which is a large campus. Again, not tall because it's very close to the airport. So, there are height restrictions there. So not a tall building. It's about 5 stories, ground and 5. So it's a small building. It's a small height-wise, but it's a large. It's a kind of horizontal spread. And there, being a self-use building, they were very particular about innovation. They were particular about, sustainability. So we got we not only did a IGBC rating, but we also got a rating from TERI, which is more stringent, TERI Griha rating and things like that. So that was the other project with the as an office building. That was this thing. The other thing was one of the first few tall buildings that we did was Lodha Bellissimo, which is a 48-story building, which is interesting. It's got a curved form, And we had never knew about the challenges of this thing of a building of that nature, as to, looking at the, we have to be very careful about the width of the building to the height of the building, the ratio of, between width to height. And, structurally, it had to behave in a certain way. We needed certain shear walls, flanking walls, etc., outriggers, etc. So all of that, I think was a big learning experience, and it's a built project. So that was another challenge, a large residential project and things like that. And one of the other projects again that we did, which was very interesting, was a school that we did, a girls' school in Ahmedabad, in Gandhinagar, for the BAPS community. So it was a girls' residential school, large school for 1,000 girls built. And that was interesting because it was a completely new kind of a program, a residential. We'd never done a residential school before. So this is so again, so as you can see, the story goes very similar, that, it's a kind of a diversity of projects that interest us at any given point of time and things like that. And currently, and then of course, my last favorite is Pallava, of course, is one of our favorite projects, because, it was just a challenge in terms of, how cities get developed. This was our first-hand experience of, working on how cities develop. And we've actually, in our last 5-7 years that we've been there, we've actually seen the city come up, grow, age, learnings, things have changed over a period of time. We started off with one typology of housing. People's expectations have become different. When we started, the price there was about 2,500 rupees a square feet. Today, the price there is 7,000. Now, as you understand, 2,500, certain things are expected. At 7,000, when your price goes up, a different expectation comes in from the end buyers, even the developers. So I think that whole evolution is quite interesting, actually. It's just in terms of, room size. So I think this whole diversity of projects, and today, we continue to be associated with Pallava. We're working on one or two other larger projects within the city for, large developments, which will kind of, redesign certain parts of the city. Some of the older developments which are there, which belong to the government kind of thing. They are now giving that to the developers to redevelop, a lot of the MADA colonies and stuff like that. So that's becoming an interesting challenge where, suddenly parts of the city will have to be relooked at, honestly speaking, in the suburbs primarily. So that is another interesting challenge. We're designing a new campus for the government, actually. Which is like a technology institute, like an IIT, but for the government. Because one of the challenges that all state governments are facing is, one of the push of the central government is, how do you create skilled jobs for the younger workforce? So a lot of these so-called state skill universities are coming up.
State skill universities.
Yeah. So we are. Yeah, so all over Gujarat it's a state subject. So Gujarat is doing it, Andhra Pradesh is doing it, everybody, Madhya Pradesh is doing it, Maharashtra is also doing it. Maharashtra, it's called MSSU, which is Maharashtra State Skill University.
So are you doing it in Maharashtra or?
Yeah, in Maharashtra. We're doing it in Maharashtra, outside of Mumbai, in Panvel, actually. So what they want to do is that there will be the main campus there. And then there'll be smaller satellite campuses in various places across the state. But this is something that will be a feeder. It'll be like the main thing where people will come here, faculty will also be come here for training and stuff like that. And they will the idea, of course, the goals are very ambitious. It's still on paper. Goals are very ambitious to really do a state skill university, and then percolate it with smaller kind of buildings or smaller campuses across the state, actually.
Right.
And this becomes like a hub and a spoke model. So you have the hub, which is the main one, and then you have spokes that go into different smaller, the hinterland and things like that, so that people don't have to travel much, and the information is available locally at the local place and things like that. So
I may ask, like, till now you've been doing different projects over the past 30 years. What is your favorite or the material which you prefer to build in India?
Okay, so I wouldn't say. I think I like to work with, honestly speaking, so of course, it's as I would call it, it's horses for courses kind of a thing, where depending on the scale of the project, depending on the context, depending on the size, location, etc. So the 3-4 things, we've experimented a lot with. So one, of course, is we like to work a lot with stone, actually. So, stone cladding, stone screens, that becomes an interesting. The other important element that we kind of find in a lot of our projects, I think climatically is very useful, is screens, actually. And we've experimented through our projects with various materials. We've done screens in stone. We've done screens in GRC, which is, again, quite successfully. We've done screens in aluminum, which is a very kind of contemporary material. We've done screens in things like chain link fencing and stuff like that, expanded metal, as I would call it. So I think screens is something that I've also found very effective in India, because it kind of does kind of cut the glare out, that's one of our big challenges that we really face, and things like that. So I would say, as an element rather than materially, as an element, I think screens, and people, of course, as right from our ancient architecture, screens have been used in India quite substantially. I think we've now, at least we've kind of, over the last 20 years of practice study, we've kind of learned to develop them with in a more contemporary manner, newer materials, etc., operable screens, folding screens, things like that, automated screens. A lot of that stuff is coming through. So I think screens is an element that we are particularly interested in. Stone is a material that we like to work a lot with, and things like that. Sometimes it's dry cladding, sometimes it's composite, sometimes it's wet cladding. So we work a fair amount. We work a fair amount with stone. Glass is another material that we like to work with, but glass with even a fair amount of screening on the glass with with print technology and things like that. We've actually done that in a number of projects and stuff like that, which kind of fritting the glass, as they call it, the glass frit and stuff like that. We've been working quite substantially with things like that. So I think we always kind of looking for newer materials and things like that, depending on the kind of projects and stuff like that, which are now coming up.
Every material you use on your project in the effective way. That's what you're looking at, right? So, can you please throw some light on your, as you mentioned, the challenges? I see that the developers or the corporates are competing with each other on the facade design. And how do you manage convincing them with your own ideas? And the contractors, of course, they go for the cheaper material on their purchase list. So how do you convince them?
It's difficult, but I think so. One, of course, is more and more one has to work a lot based on performance-based analysis. That you have to show them the long-term goals, to say that, okay, like, say, for example, give you a simple, if you're doing an office building, and if you have, I'm just saying, if you have a series of, vertical fins and stuff like that. Now, obviously, vertical fins is going to cost you money on the project and things like that. And developers, is this really required? And then if you can, you'll have to convince them to say that in the long run, your performance costs will come down, etc., etc. So it's a battle. It's not an easy thing. It's a battle. One kind of has to. I think performance-based convincing is the only way that one can actually is the way forward, and things like that. And you have to work with the. I honestly feel at the end of the day, with clients, you have to work with them. They also have a budget, not only for a certain, because then beyond a certain point, it doesn't become viable for them as this thing. So at that point of time, you also, I think, right at the beginning, I think one has to look at, how much glass you use in a building, for example. It's better to use good quality stuff rather than having too much glass. Reduce quantities, etc. Use it in a sensible manner. We've done buildings where the north face has got a lot of glass because it allows glare-free light coming in and stuff like that, while the south face is a lot more layered and a lot more this thing. So I think you have to look at it. It's not, you can't do a building and then close the envelope 4 sides with glass. I don't think that's really the appropriate way to do it, honestly speaking, and it makes a big difference to the end user.
Looking at the future for the next, say, 20 years, 2050, what kind of progress in facade technologies, materials, and what kind of progress in the construction aspects do you see?
So
and
one
what
thing,
do
of course,
you wish to see, in fact?
yeah. So one of the things, of course, is that one of the things that I wish to see is at least, and other things is one, of course, is I think glass and aluminum, which I'm just talking about. I'm actually a lot more concerned about the residential sector than the commercial sector. Well, the commercial sector is developing in its own way and things like that. I think high quality glass, high performance glass is all becoming affordable in these kinds of projects, and people have the access to it also, and things like that. And a lot of the people and fabricators are using it and things like that. My bigger concern is with the residential sector, where how do you really kind of do more cost-effective solutions, but with innovation. So I think the industry, the fenestration industry, as I would call it, the fenestration industry, I think really needs to kind of needs to up the ante in terms of their own technology, etc., etc. At the moment, it's very, and I find a lot of the residential sector being very even today, the aluminum is a very cottage industry approach, where you buy the sections from the market, and like a carpenter would cut wood in the past, today aluminum is cut and installed together. I think I expect to see a lot more kind of prefabrication coming in and stuff like that, which will ensure higher quality, higher performance, etc., etc. Use of use of innovative sections which cut down the amount of aluminum that you use, but bring costs within a certain level of control. How do you get in ventilation into the windows and stuff like that? Today we have a very standard either sliding windows or casement windows which are openable. How can we really get newer type of ventilation elements and stuff like that? And I think those are the things that those are things that I want to see the industry really facade industry, I think, really when it comes to because we have no choice but to go tall, because pressure on land is tremendous. So I don't think that there is a horizontal expansion. If you look at examples like China and stuff like that, there's a fair amount of innovation going on there in China in scale, because they are having prefab. I think speed of construction. The idea is that you can't take 10 years to do a project. You've got to do a project lesser time, and for that prefabrication, doing it at a factory and getting it to the site and installation. I think those are the kinds of things that we are not yet seeing in India. Beginning to see it to some extent, but I think I hope to see more and more of that in the next 15, 20 years and stuff like that.
Means you wish to see prefabricated, more efficient?
Yeah, absolutely. Prefabricated construction across the board. I think there is some experimentation going on, not very successful as yet, because it's not been accepted by people. We're still stuck with this thing. So I think prefabricated construction, pods, etc., all of that stuff, even for residential, if the entire unit is made in a factory and then installed at site and gotten unit by unit, where the windows are properly done and everything, rather than everything doing kind of, as I would call it, installing at site, which is all clumsy in a certain sense, very difficult to control quality in a factory environment. It's like how cars are made. Cars are not made in your garage. Cars are made at a factory, and they get shipped to you. They're literally shipped to you. Why can't houses be done in a similar manner? And I'm hoping to see some of that stuff, at least as far as innovation in terms of facade and things like that. How do you kind of close the envelope of a building very effectively? That kind of a thing, which is in our case, heat and rain are the two critical elements that we need to.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that, sir. Two elements, critical elements.
One is heat. Heat, and the other thing is rain. Especially a lot of our country, especially along the coast, faces very heavy rainfalls, and a lot of our windows, they leak, honestly speaking, and that's a problem. And why can't we get that correct? It's not very difficult to get that correct. We don't get it correct because one guy is doing the masonry, and then the window comes in, and the junctions are always untidy. And so those, I think I want to see innovation at a grassroots level, where middle income housing or lower middle income housing really, kind of ups the this thing and things like that.
A lot of R&D is required in this.
Yes, a lot of R&D, a lot of experiment, a lot of this thing I think is required, and there'll be learnings, and I think more and more of that stuff needs to get done. I'm hoping it will get done in the next 10, 20, 12 years.
So in another question which arises in my mind is that now we have Griha, we have IGBC, we have GBC, we have ECBC, we have so many other things which decide on the quality of the stuff. But do we find it difficult to choose with all these kind of certifications and branding? Probably when you look at the buildings, only the corporate insist on these things.
Sure.
But as an architect, how do you recommend that you should go for this brand, ECBC, or whether it is Griha, or whether
to tell you very frankly, a lot of these. So I think I would say that really the client looks at it from the advantages that it gets with this kind of rating. But I think that if to tell you very frankly, as a practice, we actually sit with the client that forget the rating part of it. If you do certain things like a checklist of what really needs to be done, then irrespective of what rating system you go in for, you will adhere to that. So I think the idea really is, we're trying to convince the client to say that this is what needs to get done for a building and stuff like that, right away, right, in terms of window wall ratios, what specifications of what sort of windows to do, ventilation, where possible, do cross ventilation, etc., and things like that. So I think natural light coming into spaces deep inside and things like that. So I think that if you do a checklist, which a lot of it is to do with passive measures, it doesn't even how you orient your building, for example, that has nothing to do with ECBC or nothing to do with Griha or nothing to do with IGBC or anything. They don't tell you how. They say that, okay, once performed, you'll get certain points and things like that. That kind of thing. So as you correctly say that the bigger corporates, because of their own corporate philosophy, are going in for these ratings in the residential sector. But a lot of the smaller guys don't see any advantage of that. So they're not even going in for that. But even if they don't go in for it, and they sometimes don't go in for it not because of money. They don't go in for it because of the hassle of the process involved. By process, I mean documentation. They're small firms, let's be honest with you. They don't have the bandwidth of 10 people to document each and everything and then submit it to IGBC and all that. They find that to be a little tedious, and rightly so. They're small firms and rightly so. So, but law firms, irrespective of that, if you can convince them that you don't have to go for rating, but can we do all these things and stuff like that? And most people would say, yes, let's do these things. Let's look at orientation. Let's look at wind direction. Let's not look at blocking the wind. Let's look at natural light coming in. And if you have a certain set of principles that you go through, I think it'll be a big, I think it'll help. That is what is sustainability. Sustainability is not about only getting some rating and things like that, honestly speaking.
Yes.
And that's the philosophy that we try to employ, really, that sustainability is something that you can do a lot of passive measures, and things like that, where which faces to open up, where do you get wind from, where do you get light from, etc., etc. Is there adequate kind of horizontal or vertical projections which protect the facade of the building from the sun and the rain and things like that. So a lot of those things, if it is kind of addressed, as I would call it, I think your buildings will be sustainable to a great extent.
Right. Okay. Sir, what is your advice to the young and upcoming architects with your experience of more than 30 years?
I think, obviously, I think, when we started, it was a little different because, there were, now, of course, it's getting to be a very, very, I would say specialized and a very, very crowded field also. By crowded, I mean, lot more schools of architecture, lot more schools of architecture coming in, lot more, newer technologies, projects are becoming much bigger and more complex, different experts coming in and things like that. So, my advice to young and upcoming architects, so it's a two-sided coin. So one is, while the opportunities are quite fantastic, and one is that, you will have to, learn to work, teamwork becomes very, very critical. You can't be a prima donna on your own today. So we also believe very strongly in teamwork, where there are different experts coming in. I can't be an expert on everything and stuff like that. I'm not fully an expert on sustainable. There are experts, who use specific software when it comes to sustainability, and we work with them, and they get equal credit for it. So the idea is that whatever your interests are, if you're interested in sustainable, then focus and get an expertise today in that particular field. Today, I think the field that way has opened up a lot more. As your magazine about facade design. Facade design has also become a specialty. Facade engineering, for example. A lot of architects are involved with facade engineering and stuff like that. We work with facade consultants all the time. And it took us time to convince a client that you needed a facade consultant. They said, facade, what will you do then? I said, I'll design the facade, but the engineering of the facade is a little different and stuff like that. So I think the idea is that today opportunities for younger architects is a lot more diverse, I would say. Your interest in open design, I think develop a speciality rather than being a kind of, jack of all, is what I would say. I think based on your strength, based on your inclination, etc., I think you have to develop a speciality that you think you can kind of pursue forward and be passionate about it. That's all what I'm trying to say. Don't worry about the monetary angle only. I think you can be, if you're interested in interior architecture has become a specialty. Right. So, now with the speciality, because it's become, when we were there, it was, you had to do everything and anything. Now it's become very, very compartmentalized, honestly speaking. Because people are, it's like, how the medical profession is, that today you have a specialist for every part of the body. Means left hand, if you want to replace your knee, there's a special only replaces knees. He doesn't look at the whole thing. So similarly in architecture and engineering, a very similar thing is happening. I noticed that to be happening and stuff like that. Right. We are doing residential work, we get more because people have seen us doing residential. We will probably not get to do an airport, for example, I'm telling you, because that's why people who do airports come in from abroad, or people who've done other airports. So I think that level of speciality is coming in, and today I can't expect to do everything. That's all what I'm trying to say. And so younger architects see opportunities of what really interests you, and pursue that with a passion. And I think that's the way I see the profession growing, honestly speaking.
So that was the last question in my questionnaire. So I again asked a lot of questions which came into my mind other than.
Sure.
And one more question which I wanted to ask is that we get a lot of questions on facade fire safety, which is a hot topic in India and abroad. So how aware are present day architects about the facade safety of the material which they recommend, and particularly in design also of say large scale tall buildings?
So I think the exposure, to tell you very frankly, is limited by this thing. So now what is happening is that I think that's where that's what I mentioned, the specialty like facade engineers, people who engineer facades come in and look at the specifications of what is the fire safety, the glass wool that you use, safety of the glass, the fire rating, etc. So architects, a lot more awareness, I think, needs to be created in terms of fire safety. And you're seeing today a lot of buildings, for example, fire hazards, and because as we go taller and things like that. And one of the things that we still have a mental block is that we still think that the fire has to be fought from the outside. That's the bigger challenge. Fire has to be fought from the inside. It cannot be in a 40-story building or a 30-story building. You can't expect a fire engine to shoot, just put water or something on it. So I think the internal systems, like where you call it sprinklers, you call it fire retardant materials, etc. Those factors become very, very critical. And today we're going taller and taller as far as buildings are concerned and stuff like that. Residential buildings, I see lesser of a problem because most windows, especially windows, and they're not openable, because at least, see, a lot of people die more than burn, they die through smoke inhalation, actually. So, just in terms of, location of fire escape exits, etc., and things like that, it's more than just the facade. I think it's also to do with the planning of the building. But I think fire is an issue which is not, people are not designers and this thing and develop, everybody is not fully aware of it. They just follow the bylaws, and the problem in our case is that each city or each state has a different set of bylaws and stuff like that. I think it some of this stuff should be standardized across the country. It's not a state subject. Fire safety is safety. It doesn't matter whether you're in Indore or whether you're in Mumbai. It doesn't matter if your building of a certain height is concerned and stuff like that. You need to. So I think NBC needs to, according with the National Building Code, is something that should be followed across the board rather than each kind of municipality having its own set of bylaws. Gets unnecessarily complicated because sometimes NBC and the local bylaws are contradictory to each other, and that becomes a problem.
That's a great point. We need to have a nationwide or
we have a national building code, and the problem is that the national building code, I think it's a very good code. They've also revised it recently. I think it's a very, very good code. The problem is that the various municipalities, they follow their own code. They don't even follow NBC. That's a problem, and then and sometimes both these things are contradict to each other. They say, okay, this is my domain. You have to follow the local regulations. You can't follow the national building code. So I think there needs to be a certain kind of standardization across the board and stuff like that. And I think that's where the government needs to step in, is what I feel.
Right. So thank you so much, sir, for the time you spent with us. It's more than a hour. I think it's more than an hour now.
Yeah, a little more than an hour. Yeah, a little more than an hour. So good. I'm glad I could do this.
While talking to you, and a lot of information and very insightful things which you told. I'm sure that the architects